things.
Rife was a master tool maker, and he knew a tremendous amount about optics. And he was also visionary in his approach. He thought outside the box. He drew outside the lines. And that's why he created something that no one has duplicated since then. I mean, when you talk with people who are supposedly the experts on microscopy, they'd say, oh, that's impossible. You know, of course, the world was flat at one time, too. You know, and the Earth, had everything, all the planets revolving around it at one time, too, and then everything changed. All of a sudden, everything was revolving around the sun, and the Earth was round.
Why leave the conventional microscope that we have in our hands at the present time in our laboratories handicap us to the point where it is at the present time? That's why I designed and built these other instruments, because I was stuck. I was against the stone wall. I couldn't do any more.
Well, Rife had to build his microscopes out of necessity, really, because using the conventional instruments, he was unable to see the microorganisms that he knew existed from other experiments. So, in addition, in order to determine if you're destroying a microorganism, you have to be able to view it in its live state. So that's really why he began and finally built his special microscopes, which were able to view the minutest organisms in the live state.
When it comes to lenses, there isn't anyone in this country or in the world that I have ever met who can handle lens systems as well as this man can. It's just second nature to him.
A key point is the Smithsonian article published in 1944. Here the electron microscope was announced along with a Rife microscope. Now both of them could see viruses for the first time, but the difference was that Rife could see it as a movie and the electron microscope saw it as a photograph. Now if you're trying to understand an organism, it's helpful to see a photograph of something, but it's much more helpful to see it as a movie because things change over time.
Over a course of 20 years, Rife constructed a series of 5 microscopes, all of which were referred to as virus microscopes because of their ability to view these minute organisms in a live state. But how did these instruments achieve what the laws of optics define as impossible?
You cannot stain those particles with your acid and aniline dye stain. No. Simply as I've stated 1,000 times, that the particles are smaller than the molecular portions or the granular structure of your acid and aniline dye stain, so the mouse can't swallow the elephant. Naturally. They can only be stained with a frequency of light. You use a monochromatic light because the monochromatic light is a portion of the spectrum.
So when you get light in the same range or a corresponding range, it will cause those microorganisms to fluoresce. That's something that people hadn't really done before or since. Use monochromatic light to investigate microorganisms and determine species specificity, a specific species of a microorganism. One of the other working principles about it was that the way that it channels the light never allows the beams of light to cross over themselves and create diffusion of the light. So you continue to have your resolution no matter how far you take the light path. You're not losing resolution.
Well, the key features of the Rife virus microscope is that they had superior magnification with corresponding resolution, and also another important factor was the contrast that with his special illumination system he was able to produce contrast in the organisms without chemical stains. And even when identifying the organisms, because of the way they're illuminating and the contrast that's produced with the so-called monochromatic light, you could identify which virus you're looking at by the color that it refracted. So that had never been done and probably still hasn't been done today. And so these key features of the microscope, which were far superior to what was available at the time, allowed him to discover things that other people were unable to because they simply lacked the equipment.
Yes, John, we have taken those pinpoint cells, or what's known as the needle point cells of pathology, and we have separated those down 14 times, and bringing the instrument clear up to 50,000 times magnification. We have photographs of those that will show that the tiny cell is composed of a series of little cells. And the little cells, again, on a higher magnification, so we bring it to 5,000 times. At 10,000 times, we see that the cells within the cells are composed of a series of little cells. Then we bring it on up and we separate it down, and we keep that little point going up, as I say, to 60,000 times, and we wonder where infinity is.
The universal microscope was a revolutionary breakthrough in optics altogether. And it's a very simple principle, what allows it to actually work. And it's amazing that no one has discovered it before then or reinvented it since then, because it isn't really outside the reach of technology that we have at all. It's fairly simple technology. It's just that the funding hasn't been there at the same time that the expertise has been there to do the work. Everything vibrates at its own frequency. If you have a crystalline protein structure involved, and you always do in microorganisms, you can set up harmonic resonance by bombarding it with frequencies as long as you're within the right ranges of frequencies. And that will literally shatter the crystalline protein structure.
It's coordinated resonance. The same as I say, you take two tuning forks that's pitched at a C or an A absolute, you strike one, the other one resonates. So we're showing an electronic frequency through the tissues of the body that simply devitalizes the bacteria with no harm to normal tissue.
Rife found lethal frequencies for at least 24 microorganisms. I say 24 because we have copies of his lab notes with those 24 microorganisms. He reportedly found frequencies for many more. For instance, we have tuberculosis, syphilis, gonorrhea, streptococcal bacteria, staphylococcal, typhoid. All sorts of microorganisms can be destroyed with the correct frequency.
We simply hunt and try. That was all we could do. We put a pure culture of the organism under the microscope and I start in and I tune this thing.
Until you can destroy that
Until I find a frequency that will destroy it. All right, then I come back with another culture. I do it. If I can do it 10 consecutive times after the instrument has been zeroed and put it back, then I can record that.
As an inventor myself, I mean, I hold 3 patents. I build robotic systems. I understand the complexity of bringing new technology to market, but I also understand the market value of this kind of invention, and the fact that the vested interests of pharmaceutical companies would be very, very threatened if such a technology came out. And science has always had a problem with this. They've always had this problem that true breakthroughs will destroy the entire financial structure which exists. So it's just not going to happen. I mean, the funding will disappear, the government will clamp down. This happens over and over and over again.
You know, there's some of these people that you talk to them, and the more you talk to them, the more you try to explain anything to them, the more they get riled up, you know, and the
from one end to the other, and we classified a frequency for an individual bacteria as its individual mortal oscillatory rate. Because when I check on that thing and look through that microscope hour after hour, day after day, tuning that damn thing to find something that's going to kill that bug, and every hour or half an hour, whatever is required, I put a new fresh culture under the microscope and keep that on, and I find something that folds it up. All right. Then I go back and zero the damn thing, come back up to my settings and put another fresh culture in it. If it'll do it 10 or 12 consecutive times, then that is recorded.
And using a simple electromagnetic wave is probably not sufficient. Dr. Reif found that using a wave that is emitted by a gas within a glass tube that has been excited by radio frequency energy, that particular wave that's emanated from that tube is a wave that is acceptable to the tissues of the body for whatever reason, and it will penetrate deep within the body and can be used to selectively oscillate those particular things that the doctor, or Dr. Reif in this case, chose to oscillate, and leave everything else alone in the body. And that's the wonder of it all, is that you have this selective scalpel-like effect using resonance. It's specific. It leaves everything else alone. It's really quite an amazing, wondrous feat.